Hello and welcome to Wild Woman. My name is Mary and I am on a journey of spiritual and creative recovery, and I am making weekly videos and posting regular blogs to keep you updated on what's going on, some of my thoughts, bemusements, and just letting you know what's going on with me. And today is the spring equinox, March the 20th. And so I thought I would share a video with you about that, talking about seasons in general, talking about the spring equinox, and at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you a little secret that I have learned recently about how to slow down time. And so you'll have to watch all the way to the end of the video to find out that secret. So let's begin. Today's the spring equinox and I'm really excited, really happy about that. So I want to talk to you first a little bit about seasons in general. And this video is kind of inspired by a conversation that I had a while back, actually last fall, with a few of my coworkers. Because they were last fall a little grumpy about the weather getting colder and it getting darker outside. And one of the things that I've learned through this spiritual recovery and becoming a wild woman and becoming more in tune with nature and with the natural cycles of life is to really accept and even embrace all of the seasons, the changing of the seasons, and to celebrate those times when we have changes from one season to the next. So I think we all have a favorite season. I do. Mine is actually autumn. So I'll probably be doing separate videos throughout the year on each of the seasons. But I thought I would talk about the spring equinox, what that means, and why we celebrate that. And I think a lot of people are really happy to be celebrating spring. And so a really quick tutorial about what is equinox, what does that mean? Well, equinox is related to the word equal. So on the spring equinox and on the autumn equinox, we have an equal amount of daylight and darkness. So it's this time of balance and equality between the light and the dark. And so that's one of the things that we really think about around the spring equinox, is that the light is really starting to come back. And so a real quick overview. So this is I live in the northern hemisphere. So if you happen to be watching this video and you live in the southern hemisphere, this would be a little bit of opposite for you. But so this time of year, around March the 20th, we have the spring equinox. We have an equal amount of daylight and an equal amount of darkness. Roughly, so any scientists out there that are watching, it's not exactly equal, I know that, but it's pretty close. And so from this point through the summer solstice, which is usually right around June 21st, there will be more daylight than darkness, and the days will just continue to get longer and longer and longer, and then we reach the summer solstice. And that is the longest day of the year and the official beginning of summer. And so from that point, from the summer solstice, we go to the days start getting shorter until we get to the autumn equinox. And then that's another day where we have about an equal amount of daylight and darkness on the autumn equinox. And the days continue to get shorter until we get to the winter solstice, which is in December. And the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. So we have this period of time. Today is the official beginning of spring on the solar calendar. And so I just thought I would share with you some of my excitement. I've been doing a lot of really fun, cool things. I've been planting some seeds. And where I live in the Midwest United States, it's not so much that we have warmer weather, because we actually have our average last frost is about mid-April. And I actually, I think 2 years ago, I went camping on the first weekend in May, and I was thinking, oh, I'll be safe. It's May. We'll have warm weather. And we actually had frost at night, and I woke up with some frost on the ground outside my tent. So we can have, depending on where you live, you can have cold and winter weather, maybe all the way up through April, maybe even May. So for me, the spring equinox isn't necessarily about warmer weather, although it's starting to get warmer. We're having some longer days, we're having some warmer weather. It's really more about the promise, this hope that we have of light and warmth and new beginnings. The trees are starting to bud out. Some of the flowers are starting to come up, those early spring bloomers. I have some friends that live in the southern United States, and they've been posting pictures on their Facebook of their daffodils, and I'm so jealous because I don't have daffodils yet. They're not coming up, but I've been checking every day. I have some crocuses in my flower bed, and they're usually really early bloomers. And just on Monday, I had my first little crocus starting to poke its head up through the ground. So I am excited that some of those early bloomers are coming out. And, you know, it's just that really exciting time of year when you are starting to see rebirth and regrowth, and things are starting to bloom. Things are starting to look brighter outside. Things are starting to turn green again, although right now I'm looking out my window and it's raining right now. And in the Midwest United States, we will have a season that I call mud season. It's really rainy, and all of the snow melt has pretty well saturated the ground. So when we get a lot of rain, it just becomes a muddy mess. My battery's dying, so I've got to pause. Okay, we're back. Very good. Got my charger plugged in. We're good to go. So we was talking about spring. So there's really this promise when you start to see the budding of the trees and those early blooming flowers coming up. It's really a promise of the future. We have this predictable, reliable pattern that we look at every year of these equinoxes and the solstices, and we mark these days on our calendars, and we have this really reliable calendar of the solar year when we look at the longest days, the shortest days, the days that have an equal amount of daylight and an equal amount of darkness. And so we really have an opportunity to celebrate those days that are marked on the calendar as those first days of each season. So I'm really excited about the spring equinox, and I've got some, like I said earlier, I planted some seeds, and so those are starting to come up, and hopefully the last frost won't be too late this year. I'll be able to get those outside really soon, and I'm excited to see all of those signs of spring starting to pop up. So I'm just really happy about that, really excited. And the spring equinox is also a time, so when we talk about having an equal amount of daylight and darkness, and it's a season, a day to celebrate balance and equality. And so what I was thinking about is balance. And balance is one of those things we all struggle to bring balance into our lives. It could be in a lot of different ways, in work and life balance, and family, balancing time with family and other things and activities, and finding balance in a lot of different ways. So the spring equinox, or even the autumn equinox, because it's a time of balance, balancing between light and dark. We can also be thinking about ways to celebrate balance in our lives, or to think about ways that we can bring more balance into our lives. So that's maybe something you want to think about, something you can do to celebrate the spring equinox, is maybe what are some of those things that are bringing you out of balance, and how do you bring yourself back into balance. Maybe you need to let go of a few things or start some new practices. Through my spiritual recovery process, so far this year, I've been working on spiritual practices, and so I think that's going to be my next video. I'm going to share with you a few things that I've been doing. This is also the season of Lent, for those of you who might be celebrating that. It's a time of spiritual practices for me. I've been fasting, and I've been doing a few other prayer and meditation practices, so that's really cool. And so that's really been helping me to bring some balance into my spiritual life, spending a little bit more time in spiritual practices. And so there's a lot of things. The other things we can do to celebrate spring, the spring equinox, the signs and symbols associated with the spring equinox are actually pretty similar to those of Easter. So a lot of people might be celebrating Easter. Easter is one of those weird holidays. It doesn't fall on the same date every year. Easter moves around, and it follows Passover. And so that's a little bit of a weird timing, because this year Easter doesn't fall until April. So it's kind of late in the spring this year. But the symbols of spring, of course, are things that symbolize rebirth, new life, new creation. So things like bunny rabbits and eggs. Eggs are these amazing symbols of new life that carry with them this hope of new birth that's contained within this egg. So a lot of people, of course, are decorating with eggs or coloring eggs. People are decorating with the bunnies that are in multiple different cultures, a symbol of life and rebirth. And so we also look at the pastel colors that are so in the spring, and it's time to sort of brighten up your wardrobe, brighten up your home, maybe put out some decorations that remind you of rebirth and the coming of more light. It has been gradually, so from the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year, up to the spring equinox, the days have been gradually getting longer, and they'll continue to get longer all the way up through the summer solstice. So really celebrating life and birth and this wonderful time of year that we all seem to enjoy, but we can bring a little bit more excitement just by observing this wonderful day that we have to mark the beginning of the spring season and to mark the beginning of new hope and hopes for warmer weather, a hope for new life and new beginnings. And so I hope you enjoy that. Now, I did promise you that I would let you in on a little secret. Here's my secret. I have discovered pretty recently that I have been able to make it seem as though I have more time, and that's really amazing. And how did I do that? Well, I'll tell you, observing time makes it slow down. Yes, observing time. So for many, many years, most of my life, I kind of just was rushing around. I would rush from one activity to another. And as a parent, we tend to do that with our kids. We just run from one activity to another and just moving from event to event. And I would often wake up and be like, oh my gosh, it's the middle of March. How did we get to the middle of March already? I totally lost track of time. And I was constantly doing that, even at Christmas time, when you think with all of the decorations and all of the preparations that we make for Christmas time, I would wake up and it'd be like, oh, it's the week before Christmas. How did this happen already? It's too soon. I haven't prepared. I haven't done my shopping. And I was always constantly surprised by the passing of time. And when a certain event would come and it was sooner than I had expected, and it kind of caught me by surprise. And so I've been very careful to observe time. And I mentioned that in this video because marking the solar markers, the equinoxes and the solstices, but also marking, observing other markers of time. I've been marking the lunar patterns. So I've been marking the new moon and the full moon on my calendar and observing those and being careful to observe different ways that we mark time on the calendar. And I shared with you in a previous video that I now have a day planner. I was never a day planner person in the past, and I'm still kind of struggling a little bit with using that and planning things ahead of time. But really observing and marking time does make it slow down, because you're really, there's a lot of talk in the culture about mindfulness, and so being mindful of time, that's another way we can be mindful. Marking the patterns of the moon, marking the seasons of the solar calendar, those are all things that we can do to remind us. So every new moon, every full moon, every solstice, every equinox reminds us to slow down and observe this season, observe this period in the lunar cycle, whether it's a new moon or a full moon. If you really observe it and just take a moment. So in my daily journal, I journal every day, I'll write down what phase of the moon we're in that particular day, whether it's waning or waxing, and I try to remember to write down how many days until the next new moon or the next full moon. And I've been counting down the days to the summer equinox and other holidays. Of course, holidays are a great way to mark seasons and to mark the passing of time, and so I've been really careful to observe holidays and things like that. So that's my secret. You can slow down time by observing it very carefully, and to watch for those natural markers of time in the natural cycles, the natural seasons. I have really feel like I have more time. Of course I don't. It's an illusion. It's a feeling. I don't actually have any more time than anybody else. My months are not any longer than anyone else's. But by marking and observing those natural markers, I've actually become more aware of the passing of time. And by using my day planner, I've been able to plan each day to include time for reading and journaling and spiritual practices. So that's my secret. Tell as many people as you want. It's not really a secret. Nobody knows. I didn't know that for years. I didn't know that you could just observe time and be more conscious and be more mindful of time. But it really does help. I mean, it truly does. It has been a really big and important step in this spiritual awakening process for me. So it's March 20th currently, and I've been starting to do this. I was doing it a little bit before, but when I really marked at the beginning of this year that I wanted this to be a time of spiritual renewal and spiritual recovery, that was one of the things that I decided I would do, was to mark the lunar cycles and the solar cycles, and it has been helpful. It really has. So maybe if you're not doing that, you might try it. That's a suggestion, something you might try. So thank you for watching, and I hope if you like this video, I hope you hit like. And if you want to know a little bit more about my spiritual journeys, and I'll be posting more videos about seasons and other topics. I'll be posting a video real soon about the spiritual practices that I've been working on. So I hope you hit subscribe and follow along. This has been a fun journey, and I'm enjoying sharing it with you. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. I'll talk to you soon.